as long as you get good exposure of the acetabulum component, it really doesn't matter um, which approach you use. And there is an offset handle, which I have not found very often that I need it. I mean, some of the really, really bigger people where you can't get the femur out of the way and you're coming in at such a sharp angle, it's hard to keep that perpendicular. That may be the only indication that I think an offset handle would be helpful, but essentially it works well no matter what approach you use. And part of the reason is you don't have to use a lot of force. So as long as you get that angle, you keep that liner and that tool perpendicular to the cup. So sticking right out of the cup, perpendicular to it's not at an angle. You don't have to really apply any force. And that's where the manual osteotome is really tough, because you try to get around, especially inferior around the trunnion, and you'd be fighting the trunnion while trying to rotate through that osteotome, through that hard cortical bone. And this, as long as you kind of pull that trunnion or that femur out of the way, it just will cut through. You don't have to apply that same force. So I think it's extremely beneficial in that regard, that you can use it through any approach. Even though in the video it looks like you can't see anything, you have one little window traveling right down that instrument, and so you can kind of see right down the shaft of it as you're holding it. And as you're holding it, you can see on the cup that liner's sitting perfectly flush. And if you notice that it comes off, then you stop. And a lot of times it'll bind if you come off at a different angle, so it'll bind, and then you kind of back off a little bit, reset it, and then tighten it up again. But and if you can't see, then you put in some type of retractor so that you can see better. But the device is, like I said, is so low profile that, I mean, it is amazingly safe in that it really won't grab anything. There's nothing to grab or spin or kind of catch it. The kerf of the blade is so thin that it just is able to cut through. Once you get it in, you get the saw blade past it. Another trick that we'll use sometimes is that instead of spinning it on forward all the way around to get it started, kind of like if you're using a handsaw and you want to like pull it, on the backhand to try to get that piece of wood, get that saw started on a piece of wood, we'll use oscillate, and we'll kind of do it in quarters. So oscillate here, and then oscillate there, and then oscillate all 4 quarters of that cup, and then start spinning it. And sometimes just that little oscillation will get the teeth biting into the bone, and then it won't catch quite as much. I got that trick from one of my partners. I think the first challenge is like kind of, well, one, getting them to use it, and having, you can use those osteotomes, and if your retractors are close by, they'll kind of just push the retractors out of the way. The retractors really, really have to be out of the way. But if you don't have those things removed and out of the way, then it will catch, and it will bind, and it can break the blade. The other thing that I think, it's the sizing of the blade. I think the fitting of the liner is kind of like a point of stress. At least it was for me at first, because I was so worried that if I didn't do it correctly, that the whole thing wouldn't work. And it is actually somewhat forgiving. As long as that liner is close in size and it's not binding in there, it's gonna be fine. If it's shucking all around, it's obviously too small, but it's actually a lot easier to size than I had, like, when I read the technique. I thought it was going to be kind of difficult to decide. It's actually it's kind of intuitive. It just kind of fits in there, and then it's good. Taking out acetabular components that are well fixed is dangerous, and it's any type of revision surgery is a little bit unpredictable. And I think the thing that EZX really did for me is that I can look at that case now and I think, all right, I can get this cup. Taking the cup out is no longer a problem. It's just part of it. And I think the workflow of EZX is pretty genius as well. Um, because with other systems, you take out, let's say you've got a cup in there, it's got 3 screws. So you get in there, you take your liner out, you take those screws out, you have to put that liner back in, which then has a hole in it, or you use an osteotome to knock it out, and it may not fit quite as well. And then you put in your rotating osteotome and you start cranking on it. With the EZX, it's kind of like there's no going back, there's no step backwards. So you take out the liner, and then you don't need it anymore. You take out the screws, then you fit it with the liner, the EZX liner, and then you just put that on the end of the EZX and you keep moving forward. You never have to kind of go back and put another liner back in. And so I think, it's kind of like one step leads into the other one, and you really never have to kind of look back to get things done. That and the speed with which it removes things. If you go 2 millimeters over, you can get these things out. And I mean, those were real-time videos, that first one. And I think it's 1 minute and 15 seconds. And that was my fellow doing it with me holding the hook. So it's, someone that's used it twice.